Chapter 27, Dictatorships and the Second World War.
And now for something completely different.
Part 2, The Rise of Benito Mussolini and Fascism. Italy, as you will recall, was a relatively new nation after World War I. It was a constitutional monarchy with universal male suffrage and some liberal institutions, but it was also a country gripped with extreme class differences. World War I had saw Italy promise massive land expansion and gains that would come from new territories acquired, but the Treaty of Versailles didn't actually grant Italy any new territory. After World War I, you saw soaring post-war unemployment and inflation, which led to a massive rise in workers joining unions and socialist parties. The workers began to strike and actually occupy the factories. This greatly upset the more conservative figures within Italy, including the king and the Catholic Church. The Pope actually lifted the ban on Catholic participation in politics, and so you see a backlash against this emerging socialist movement. Benito Mussolini would emerge in this chaos as one of the leading political figures in Italy. Prior to World War I, he was actually a member of the Socialist Party and was a radical newspaper editor, but he was very much in favor of Italy joining World War I, and in 1914 he gave a very famous speech.
Blood alone moves the wheels of history!
So first, this is another example of knowing things making things funnier. But more importantly, for our purposes, Mussolini was expelled from the Socialist Party in 1914 as a result of this position. He would serve in World War I and would be disillusioned like many Italians. He became a political leader of a group known as fascism. And he found that by being a sworn enemy and highly critical of socialism, it won him many followers. And him and many other World War I veterans formed a group known as the Black Shirts. And this group would beat up and attack socialist newspapers and radical left-wing groups. And eventually, on October 1922, Mussolini and the Black Shirts would march on the city of Rome and demand that Mussolini be given more power within the government. The king, who was in favor of a more conservative government, made Mussolini the prime minister of Italy in 1922. Fascism is a new political movement in the early 20th century, so let's take a moment and talk about exactly what it is. The term itself was literally coined by Benito Mussolini and his political party, the Fascists, and it came from the term fasces. Now, the fasces was a symbol of government power, but it was also what ancient Roman judges carried with them. It was a bundle of sticks with an axe head attached to it. The symbolism behind it was the idea that a single stick is very easy to snap and break, but a bundle of them is incredibly difficult, and so this concept of strength through unity. Fascism typically believed in having a strong government with one leader, centralized power. It has a strong hatred of communism, but also felt that democracy is weak. There's a preaching of violence and war as being good. Now, the King of Italy declared Mussolini the prime minister in 1922 and not the dictator. Mussolini would move very slowly to try to consolidate his control of the government. In 1924, the Fascist Party won an overwhelming majority as the Constitution of Italy was changed that whatever party received the most votes would be granted 2/3 of the seats in parliament. With control of parliament, Mussolini was able to pass a wide variety of extremely repressive measures. Freedom of the press was abolished, election was fixed, and essentially you had a government ruled by decree as Mussolini arrested his political opponents, disbanded all the independent labor unions, and put dedicated fascists in controls of Italy's school. And this is, again, how fascism represents a totalitarian government. Mussolini would trumpet his very famous slogan, everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. And so by 1926, it really was a one-party dictatorship headed by Mussolini. The final consolidation of this came in the Lateran Agreement of 1929, where Mussolini recognized the Vatican as an independent state in return for the Pope's support of Mussolini's government. Fascism is known for its love of spectacle. The fascist state in Italy engineered popular consent by staging massive rallies and holding sporting events. They created fascist youth and women's movements. They also provided new welfare benefits to make people be supportive of this new government. The purpose of all of this was to create the sense that this party was overwhelmingly popular and that everyone supported it. Another way in which Mussolini sought to gain support was by reinforcing traditional gender roles and being opposed to this emerging first-wave feminism that was sweeping the Western world with suffrage movements, which would result in women gaining the right to vote in England in 1918 and the United States in 1919. Italy emerged on the international scene with its invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. This African nation was oil-rich and was an important strategic resource for Italy. Some historians cite this as the true start of World War II. This brutal colonial war really shocked the international world, but it pushed Germany and Italy into closer ties. And those ties are going to see Hitler influence Mussolini really for the first time as Italy begins to adopt some anti-Jewish racial laws. And you start to see Mussolini embrace some of these ideas of racial purity. But despite these celebrations of racial purity, extreme anti-Semitic persecution really does not occur in Italy until very late in World War II, when Italy was actually under direct Nazi control. Today, the term fascist is pejorative. If you're calling something fascist, you're really speaking poorly of that person or that government. And so for most of us, we think someone who is supporting fascism must be something like this.
Got a spike through my head, a spike through my head, spike through my head, a spike through my head, a spike through my head.
But you really need to put yourself in the mind frame of the people living in that tumultuous time right after World War I, with extreme high unemployment and really it feeling like the world itself was coming to an end. And so the fascist promise of returning order was very appealing to a large group of people. To the middle class, to the upper class, the fact that the fascists were not communist was a huge benefit and something that they were very much supportive. The other main thing is that fascists promised to restore order and national pride. So I think it's understandable why this promise of a return to greatness could be appealing. And from 1922 to 1933, Mussolini is going to be the leader of the sole fascist government in the world. Next time, we will discuss the rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany.